everybody. Hello, hello. This is the second stream on Streamlabs rather than StreamYard. We are experimenting. So the camera capture is a different zoom. So I've pushed it away, and let me know if you can hear me okay, because I feel like the speaker's going to have to work a little harder to pick up my voice. So I'm going to try to be a little clearer and throw my voice a little more. Yeah, good morning. Happy Sunday, everybody. This is going to be a Victober themed stream for the Booktube side of things, but in case you don't know, my name is Margaret Pinard. Welcome to my channel. You're on Booktube. I sometimes do AuthorTube. I sometimes do Booktube. As my description says, 75% Booktube, 25% AuthorTube fibers. So today is October 6th, so Victober is splendidly begun. I've got recommendations out. I did put an Instagram post and a YouTube community post up with my recommendations and possibilities. I still have not started mine. What I'm reading right now is for a interview coming up. So my Good Fight Fridays, 11th of October will be Joy Jordan Lake. So I started another of her books called A Tangled Mercy, which is a dual timeline, which is cool. I didn't know that. She will be coming on Friday evening this week, so don't miss that with my Good Fight Friday author interview series. I'm really loving this one, Witch of Wild Things by Raquel Vasquez Gilliland, which is like a witchy Latine read for the second half of Hispanic Heritage Month. And then this one is also very interesting, called Slow Down by Kohei Saito. And it's a book about degrowth and the environmental catastrophe and economic growth modeling. And if that doesn't put you to sleep yet, then you might be as interested in it as I am. But so those are the ones I'm trying to focus on and finish. And then the one I have primed and ready to go for Victober is William Wells Brown, Clotel, or The President's Daughter. But what I thought I would talk about today, instead of recommendations, is why Victorians? Why are they special? Why do they occupy such an outsized position in my brain and in society at large? So I have a few points on this, just sort of thoughts as I fell asleep last night because I didn't know what I would be talking about today. So hopefully that's entertaining. We've got Cat Paw here saying Victorian Sunday, y'all. And Leslie here saying happy Sunday. Sound is excellent from my sound engineer friend. Thank you. And Anita is here, coming in fine. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So the only thing I didn't do was this. So welcome, everybody. So Victober, the readathon that happens in October, reading Victorian novels and plays, etc. What is Victorian? So I grew up in a Victorian house, and that has influenced my sort of predilection for the Victorian aesthetic, I will say, for sure. But I also started loving Victorian things when I started reading them in high school. So English Lit requirements of summer reading, 1995. That's right. I read Jane Eyre, and like it was my favorite book for at least a decade. So what is it about the Victorians and that time period? What is it about the Victorian literature that we read that is so rewarding? And what makes it so different? And then how does it relate to today? So that's sort of the outline I'm going to be going through today. There we go. And if you have questions or if you have recommendations of books, feel free to drop them in. We have a new face already overbooked. Nice to see you here. Thanks for coming. All right. So the first thing is the Victorian period. So I made up the modern period and a readathon to go with it that follows the Victorians. But if you want to think about the Victorian century, Victoria ruled in Britain from 1837 to 1901. So it's most of the 19th century. And since I was born in the 20th century, I know I'm old. It feels like that was the one that was immediately preceding. You can sort of dice it up differently, but I feel like it's easy to look back on. We've got lots of printed matter, we've got lots of evidence, we've got lots of things in museums. So it's easy to verify things, and we think we have a handle on what went on during the Victorian period. So it's enticingly and maybe not disturbingly, but in a misleading way, familiar. So that's an interesting point that I'm going to talk about. It's also got a lot of things that relate to today that are still ongoing. So the Industrial Revolution started in Victorian times-ish, right? And capitalism really got going. Imperialism, all these things really got going under the Victorian era. And so these are things we're still struggling with today, the impacts of them. Dominated by English language and literature. One of the reasons why it's such a great choice for a readathon is that the British Empire ruled the seas and conquered much of the world. And so English language and literature really sort of got dispersed. A lot of people had to, whether they wanted to or not, conduct much of their lives in English. And so this is interesting for Victorian literature. And yeah, and I grew up in a Victorian house, so that made me, I think, predisposed to gravitate towards things that happened in the 19th century. Cat Paws says, I've lived in a couple of Victorian houses too. They were very cold and drafty, but dang, they were beautiful. Yes. Well, they would have been very nice and cool in the summers then, right? Because of the high ceilings and some of the things that they used. So I don't know. Pluses and minuses, right? So we'll get into like scientific and capitalism stuff in a second, but literature themes. So my pile is over there. This is the only book that I have at the moment, but literature themes that come up in Victorian books are, let's see, self-reliance. So we've got a very individualistic model coming from the British Empire being exported to the world in their novels. We've got the Gothic wing of Victorian literature, which is Mrs. Radcliffe influenced, a little bit about like delving into science and religion and still having some role for the unknown and like the dark interior of the soul. So I think like the Gothic wing has inspired a lot of literature today, like fantasy and paranormal and all these kinds of books that we love to read. So that got its start then. The supernatural. I will say the supernatural is a bit different. It's separate because when I think of Jane Eyre, I think of the period, the incident, I should say, in that book where Jane Eyre hears a voice call several times in the wind, and it's attributed to like the power of nature to like bring two people together. And it's definitely like a supernatural element that contributes to the love story. And the supernatural in that respect is positive. So that's very interesting because the 19th century had a lot of diversion between science and faith, and to have something like the supernatural nature be a positive thing in a book that's written by a minister's daughter is very interesting to me. So that's something to ponder. So I said self-reliance, and what I mean by that is that you're not predestined to your fate. So instead of feudalism and the Middle Ages, we're in this age where we can determine our own destiny, so supposedly, so-called. So you've got nations that are doing this, self-determination, as well as people and classes. And oh, what a good segue. In my book that's coming out this fall, Orla Rafferty seeks her fate. She is part of a movement where the political system is being reformed, and she's trying to learn as much as she can to determine her own destiny. That's all I'll say for that. And if you're curious about this novel that I have written that is set in the Victorian period, you can sign up to get free Patreon updates, because that's where I'm putting all the reveals and extra like doodads concerned with the book's release this fall. So self-determination. We've got what I think of when I think of Thomas Hardy, which is the Wheel of Fate. So we're not predestined, but we're also struggling with this idea that destiny has a role. So in Thomas Hardy, I remember learning in high school about, like your worthiness is somehow dictating your fate. And so if you have done something wrong, fate is going to bring you down, and like a water wheel, it's going to put you through the ringer before you're allowed to come back up and have some sort of happiness in life. So I remember that as a clear like tension between themes of like self-determination and Jane Eyre and the Wheel of Fate, and not entirely being in control of your destiny. So there's that interesting piece that makes Victorian literature very interesting. Let's see, freedom. Class is not your worth. So here's another interesting one. Like, I think with Calvinism and religious doctrine and what you were taught from the pulpit before Victorian times, a lot of the class structure and sort of socioeconomic layers of society was deemed to be the way God wanted it, right? So if you were a serf, you were meant to be a serf. If you were a noble, you were meant to be a noble. You were worth more. And I feel like the political awakening of the classes during Victorian times, and of course the revolutions just preceding them, was really shaking up this belief, and people were starting to think that, maybe the situation you're born into is not what you're fated to be all your life. There's education, there's merit-based, posts and work and things like that. And people started seeing isolated examples of people succeeding and changing their class, or, falling from grace, as it were. And so that questioned the whole, like, are we really supposed to just stay where we started? Which I love. So, so that's great. And romance. Yes. So we had romance before. Okay, so this isn't a romance, and I'm going to cover this on Wednesday in a wrap-up. I read this as background for my novel. It's The Man of Feeling by Henry Mackenzie. So the structure of novels was very different before the 19th century. And this is an example of like, novels weren't really a thing. So you had to like pretend why you were writing fiction. Oh, I found this manuscript in a treasure chest. Or, oh, I found these pieces of paper in someone's will and testament. And so it's kind of a weird stitched together group of stories of a man's life. And it's supposed to be holding up someone who has the capacity for emotion and feeling and compassion, and saying that this is someone to look up to, even though other people in his life are taking advantage of him, etc. So it was sort of like a counterculture thing at the end of the 18th century. And it affected people's values and such going into the 19th century. So I thought that was interesting. But the format of the literature was just very confused. They were definitely grasping at ways to explain why they were not just doing histories or, like the Romans, worthy subjects that are historical. You had romances like Sir Walter Scott's, who's on my list. He's over there in his tiny, tiny font. and that was sort of like a chanson de gestes, like it was a tradition from the Middle Ages they could allude to. But a lot of things pre-19th century were like trying to justify themselves. And so I feel like Victorian literature is where people really came into like the novel and celebrating it for what it was rather than trying to make it something it wasn't. And so we really get into some fun stuff. So that's why Victorian literature is still fun to read. People were having a wild time experimenting, and that's why we're reading it for October. I've got, I guess, one more piece of this, which is that the Victorians, so outside Victorian literature, which is what we're reading for October, the Victorians themselves are fascinating to me and have been for a long time. So as I said, they left a lot of evidence. They changed a lot of things that still have impacts today. And so we can examine those things. Is it prima facie, like on the evidence? We don't have to rely on other people's notes because it's actually still there, right? The material culture is still there. And there was a lot of potential for progress. There was a lot of progress, however you want to define it. There was scientific improvements, there was technological improvements, there were communications improvements, there were expansions of the franchise. There were lots of changes in the 19th century, and some for good, some for bad, right? So much potential and so much damage, honestly. So I do love looking at what the Victorians hath wrought, because some of it is interesting in novels and funny and instructive and clever and enjoyable. But a lot of it is needing to be cleaned up after, like Exhibit A, climate crisis from the Industrial Revolution, right? So I just thought for today's stream, like, celebrate Victorian literature, but also think about Victorians in general and the British Empire and how it created a lot of great things for us to enjoy, but also left a lot of things to clean up. And so maybe that should be part of your Victober process too. I don't know, just a suggestion. Let's see. Jim came in to say hello. Hello. And nope, I've got the title reveal. I've got the pub date reveal. It will come out on November 30th. But the cover reveal and the pre-order are still to come. And so that's when that's where you will be going to the Patreon to get the latest updates. They will get the news first. So you'll be all set, cat paw. Emma Bennett is here. Hello, hello. And people saying hi, hi, hi. Excellent. I did not have a Wednesday stream. I will not have a Wednesday stream normally going forward, but I will do Wednesday wrap-ups every other Wednesday. So there will still be like a schedule. Every couple of weeks, I will be updating you on what I've been reading. I've got the 18th century, I've got some romance, I've got some bad romance, and I've got some fantasy. So we'll see whether I finish any Victorian literature or any of my nonfiction or my fantasy or my historical fiction. There's a lot going on. But that is what we'll see Wednesday. And then, like I said, Friday is going to be my second Good Fight Friday with Joy Jordan Lake joining me as another historical fiction writer. Hi, Didi. Hello, hello. She's reading Les Miserables in French or English. I am curious. So Hugo is not on my list for Victober or for my 3 French 19th century writers, but it is a classic, and I think it would be a really great read. So well done. Jem is informing me that November 30th is St. Andrew's Day. That is true. It is the patron saint of Scotland, which is kind of nice because my book takes place in Glasgow. But it is also, for those of you in the US and maybe other places, Small Business Saturday. It is the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And so that is reserved for small businesses, independent businesses trying to get a jump on your holiday shopping for you, and sort of put a curtain over the Black Friday madness that someone else is in charge of doing, because that is destructive. And so, yeah, we try to boost up the Small Business Saturday news. Katya is here. Hello, hello. And in case you didn't know, or in case you missed the first minute, I'm on a new platform. I'm using Streamlabs, and I'm sort of adjusting to the free version before I commit to paying for it, because StreamYard is increasing their prices times 3 for some or 4 for others. And that is just not feasible since I don't make money from my channel. So we're going to be going to another free software, or at least less money. And yeah, so we're trying it out, and thank you for bearing with me for all like the new things that I'm doing. The intros, the outros are different, etc. So we'll just see how this goes. And shout out to writer Sam Wicker, who is the one that did the initial trying to sort out the options. And we're both experimenting with Streamlabs. So we'll see how we get it. Cat Paw just bought A Tale of Two Cities. Another, oh, not another Dickens. I haven't mentioned Dickens yet. So, funny story about A Tale of Two Cities. Wait. No, I have read A Tale of Two Cities, but not on ebook. How did I read it? I can't remember. And it's too long ago. I don't think it's on my Storygraph. I read Bleak House on a Kobo electronic reader, and the finger pad got numb because the screen was so small that it was like 2 paragraphs, and then I had to keep swiping. And so it grated on my fingers after a while. So that put me off the Kobo forever, unfortunately. Dickens novels, not what you want to read on an e-reader, at least the older generation. This is like 10 years ago. Okay, so Dee Dee says, I'm leading a read-along for October and November. This time I'm reading it in English. Oh, okay, so Les Mis in English for the English reading community. Excellent. We've got a JC in the house. Hello, friend. Katya says, what? If you commit to it, I may have to join you. You're the Booktube live stream guru. Well, I'm starting over from scratch again, so who knows, right? Streamlabs asks you to download something onto your desktop, which I haven't committed to doing yet either. So there's like lots of swampy things to wade through, including the fact that for some reason the camera has a different wide view. Like I am much closer. The screen, my laptop, is a foot away than it is normally placed, and I'm still bigger in the screen. I don't like it. So I haven't figured out how to change that. We're still tinkering. Oh, yeah. And Dita says, I need to read A Tale of Two Cities. Hope to read something Dickens in December. Good plan. Good plan. Oh my gosh. So I just took y'all down a little. Why do we care about the Victorians live stream? This was just to like bolster my you should read books written in the Victorian period Victober fangirl persuasive call, if I have any ability to persuade. Yes, there are books that have problematic characters and portrayals in them because we have graduated from the social views that we had in the 19th century for the most part. But they do have fun themes. They do have interesting conclusions. They do say revealing things about humanity, so they're worth reading. And the historical part, for me at least, I do love going back to learn about what people struggled with and how we got to the political situation that we have today, because I think that helps us sort of untangle how to unmess it up, because some of it is pretty messed up. So yeah, scientific discoveries and industrial history, these are all things that make up where we are today. And if we want to get out of the crisis that we have today, I think going back to the Victorian period and investigating the history is worthwhile. There's a little bit of it in this economics book, so that's like a good sign for me, because I like seeing the root of things. Jim says he'll be reading Barnaby Rudge this month, which I think is a Dickens, a lesser known Dickens. Let's see. You probably listed it, and I saw the list and I've already missed it. A Tale of the Riots of 80. Oh, it's about riots. It is a Dickens book. 1780 religious riots. Oh, okay. Oh, interesting. All right. So it's a Victorian historical fiction because it's about 1780, before Dickens was born. That's a very interesting one, Jim. I will be curious to hear. Maybe you'll do a vlog on this one. Who knows? Jim could be like branching out. That would be really cool. So yeah, these are just my thoughts on why Victorian literature is important and studying history is important. And so this is why there are lots of different readathons to participate in each year. But I always come back to at least trying something for Victober. Of course, I've been reading Victorian history books all year because it has to do with my historical fiction. But for those who aren't as immersed, that is just a little nudge to get you to try something this month. The Gordon riots. Gordon recalls to me Catholic, but I don't know the details. So I will look forward to your review, Jim. Yeah, I don't know much about Barnaby Rudge as a title, so that will be new to me. Oh, and Jim is branching out into reading Emily Bronte's poetry this Victober. I read a poetry book of the Brontes, I think the first Victober I participated in. It had something from each of the sisters. It was okay. There was only a few. Whenever I read a poetry book, there's only like a few that really hit. And so it's always like hit or miss for me. But I hope you find some good ones in Emily Bronte's oeuvre, let's say, and enjoy the Victober. So that's my pitch for you guys to do a little history diving and play reading, perhaps, because that's one of the prompts, and Victorian literature exploration. Hopefully I sold you on something. And yes, so I will see you on Wednesday and Friday this week, and we'll continue to experiment with the Streamlabs. If you want to, I don't know, experiment together, let me know. And if you are, what was the thing that I was going to leave you with? There was if you want to read a thing. Well, I can't remember. Anyway, if you know how to change the camera focus on the computer, I would appreciate dropping that hint. Otherwise, I think we're good for today. Thank you so much for joining, and happy reading, everyone, with whatever readathons you're joining this month. I will see you again soon. Thanks, everybody.